And MC for our dear Gary Greenberg, who was not able to be here this evening due to a family event, and he was not able to come tonight. Unfortunately, he is the one who set everything up, so unfortunately, you've got me instead. So, thank you all so much for coming out this evening to the 2023 Houghton Neighborhood Association Kirkland City Council Candidate Forum. And of course, a bigger thank you to the 5 candidates who will introduce themselves here in a moment. Their commitment to help make our community a better place is to be applauded. So thank you all for being here this evening. We appreciate your hard work and your willingness to serve. So just quickly, a quick show of hands, how many people know exactly who they're voting for and what they're voting for in a few weeks here? You all know? Yeah, you know exactly what you're doing. And then a quick show of hands, who doesn't know what they're voting for? Yes. Okay, so this is why we're here. We're going to learn about all of that tonight. So we appreciate all of the questions that were submitted earlier when there was something sent out on our website. We asked for some questions, and they were submitted for tonight's forum. Due to time constraints, we aren't going to be having question and answers, but we did have those questions that were sent in addressed on the highest ranking ones, rather, will be addressed tonight. And those were the ones that were sent in among the Houghton residents. So a big thank you for our moderator this evening, Jeff Pogula, who is going to be taking over here in a moment. Jeff is heavily engaged in local, state, and national politics each day as a political and general assignment reporter, as well as news anchor for Northwest News Radio AM 1000, FM 97.7 here in Seattle. And Jeff is used to being fair and impartial, as his second job is a referee or an umpire, depending on the sport, for high school and college athletics. So, last thing, if you would all please silence your cell phones, so we don't have any interruptions. And without further ado, Mr. Pogula.
Well, thank you for that introduction, and it is my honor to be here moderating this debate. Just a quick couple of thoughts. Engagement in the political process is obviously something that over the last few decades has diminished a bit. Like him or dislike him, Donald Trump certainly got a lot of people more engaged in the political process, either pro or con. One of the sayings in politics that I'm so fond of, and I use it in leadership lessons and leadership things that I do, is the phrase, decisions are made by those who show up. So with the people here looking to be more engaged in the process, as I said, and learn from their candidates, and the candidates willing to participate in this, obviously we're getting more and more people who are wanting to show up and make those decisions, because, as I said, decisions are made by those who show up. If you aren't engaged, society passes you by. But with that said, here we are, and welcome to the debate. And first off, a big thank you to all of the participants that decided to show up. Let's give them a round of applause. We did have one person back out at the last minute, also due to a family commitment, a family emergency. Not only Gary Greenberg, who is my former boss, but candidate Amy Falcone, who was supposed to be up here for position 6, had a last-minute emergency with her family and was not able to show up. But we are moving on. Nevertheless, here are the ground rules for tonight's forum. All questions will be directed to the candidates by myself. There will be time limits, which will be enforced by our timekeeper, which is sitting right in front. So each candidate will have up to 3 minutes for an opening and closing remark. And then for each question, the candidate will have up to 1 minute to provide an answer. Now the moderator, me, will have the opportunity to ask for follow-up questions as necessary, and I will reserve the right to push for an answer. So ducking the question and pivoting and changing, we're not going to have any of that tonight. We'll make you answer the questions. Our timekeeper will hold up a 15-second card when time is running out, and a stomp card when you must quickly complete your sentence. To keep things moving, we respectfully ask the audience refrain from applause during the question and answer segment. Okay to applaud after opening and closing remarks. So before we get to the opening remarks for each of the candidates, we figured we'd have a little bit of fun and go through a bit of a speed round. Now, keep in mind, I didn't write these questions, so don't blame me. First off, and let's just kind of go down the line, what neighborhood did each of you live in?
Houghton. Houghton.
Kingsgate.
Houghton.
North Rose Hill.
Favorite Kirkland Park? Yeah, if you could pull the microphone up closer to these, yeah, you might have to, obviously you're going to have to share for those of you who are at two at a table.
Y'all in the back can hear us even if we don't put our face right in the mic, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
okay. Oh, I think we can just leave it there. Awesome.
So again, the second question, favorite Kirkland Park?
Phyllis Needy, because I took my girls there when they were toddlers. Juanita Beach, which we just won an award for.
132nd Square. Houghton Beach Park.
Marina Park.
Favorite restaurant? In Kirkland, of course.
Go ahead. Restaurant Paradiso.
The Grand Bistro Americano.
Pizza Bay. Bottle and Bowl. It's a bar, sorry.
Again, if we could be much closer to the microphones, then Zach, our audio guy, doesn't have to turn them up so much and we don't get the feedback.
Favorite restaurant, Feast on Park Lane.
Favorite hobby?
Oh. No surprise to most of you, gardening.
Community service. Hanging out with my kids.
Anything automotive, and then kick it back over to you.
Oh, probably food and wine.
And finally, and we will judge you for this, favorite genre of music?
The blues.
Now, since I sing in 3 different choirs, I have to say choral music. I'm currently playing country in my car right now, so choose that.
Mine is house techno and anything Madonna.
Mine's kind of an eclectic mix, anything my kids are listening to lately.
Fair enough. All right, that brings us to our candidate opening statements, and we'll just go right on down the line once again. Each of you have 3 minutes to respond. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Katie Malik, and I'm running for Kirkland City Council because I want to represent the residents of Kirkland. I'm running and I'm a voice for change. Kirkland's experiencing unprecedented growth right now, and the choices that we're faced with and the council's faced with, I haven't necessarily been excited about the choices that they've been making. And a lot of the things they've been doing have been behind closed doors and without public input. So the core principles of my campaign, I'm running on transparency, public safety, and financial responsibility and accountability. I think the La Quinta is a perfect example of a lack of transparency. That was a done deal before we even found out about it. And for public safety, crime is up. In the 2016 benchmarking survey for our police force, we're actually currently under 24 police officers at this point, and that's based on we're 24 under based on population in 2016. We've grown since then. Our firefighters were without a contract for 3 years. They just closed that contract. These are folks who were going into houses during COVID and putting their lives and their families' lives on the line. Financial responsibility. Our current city budget is twice what it was 10 years ago, and our population's only grown by 10%, yet our current council is asking for more additional taxes, and including creating a new car tab tax that will go into place on January 1st, 2024. So a little bit about me. I grew up on the east side. I lived in Kirkland for 20 years. I'm raising my kids here. My oldest goes to Lake Washington High School. My youngest will also go to Lake Washington High School. My undergraduate degree is in history. I have a minor in Near Eastern Languages and Civilization. I have my master's degree in healthcare administration. My current role, I'm the Associate Director of Finance for OBGYN. I've lived and worked in a complex environment for 15 years, doing both operations and working with intercompany finances, compliance, and it's given me the experience that I need to effectively help run the city of Kirkland. And then I just, to learn more about me, you can also check out my website, which is katieforkirkland.com, and tonight I really hope to earn your vote. Thank you.
Kelly Curtis.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's nice to be here tonight, and thank you to the Houghton Neighborhood Association for putting forth this forum, and thank you for all of you coming in the rainy weather. I am Kelly Curtis, and I'm honored to serve on the Kirkland City Council. I'm running for re-election to continue the important work of building a vibrant future for the Kirkland. I've lived in this beautiful city for almost 30 years, 23 in Houghton. My father was an Air Force pilot, a career Air Force pilot, so I lived frequently all over the world, and this is the longest I've lived anywhere. I've raised my family here. I own a small business. I've served on the Park Board, the Houghton Community Council, and the Housing Strategy Advisory Group. Currently, I serve on a number of regional committees that focus on housing, salmon recovery, urban forestry, conservation, and growth management planning. I'm also chair of our legislative work group. I am grateful for the opportunity to serve all of you, and I hope you will be able to tell tonight that I care deeply about the city and the people that live here. I have always volunteered in every community I've been in. I volunteered in my children's schools. I was 14 years a master gardener. I do the city work, and I currently serve on the Homeward Pet Adoption Center, where I've fostered dogs for 15 years. I truly believe in rolling up your sleeves and getting busy and making a difference in the community that you live in. Like every city in our region, we are facing significant change. I will continue to bring a thoughtful focus on our growth and our livability and make sure that we are a safe, sustainable, and welcoming community. I'm incredibly proud of what your council has done over the last 4 years. We have built more affordable housing for all ages and incomes, so our seniors, our workforce, and our young people can live in the community they grew up in. We implemented sustainability actions, expanded our tree code to combat climate change, and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We built new sidewalks and bike lanes. We expanded and improved our park system with our new Totem Lake Park, revitalized Juanita Beach, David Brink, and 132nd Square Park. We built a safety net for our community members in crisis by creating a community responder program so that mental health professionals reach out into the community. We improved our fire response times by building new fire stations and revitalizing 3 more. Your local fire station 22 will be having an open house this Saturday. I hope everybody comes and enjoys it. And we increased community safety with supported, well-paid, fully staffed police department. I love this work. It's challenging, it's exhausting, and you rarely make anyone or everyone happy. But I've worked hard the last 4 years to listen to residents, make decisions that improve your everyday lives, and build a future for Kirkland where everyone can thrive. I look forward to the conversation tonight.
Moving on to position number 4, Toby Nixon.
Well, thank you very much. I am Toby Nixon. I'm in my 12th year on the City Council, seeking election to a 4th term. I previously served as a fire commissioner and as a state representative for the 45th Legislative District. My wife, Irene, and I have lived in Kirkland for over 30 years, all in the Kingsgate neighborhood. We raised our 5 children there, and thankfully, they're all grown and living with their own families. I've served on a number of nonprofit boards in Kirkland and the East Side, including currently serving as Vice President of Attain Housing and Chair of the Board of Nourishing Networks Consortium. I co-chaired the committee supporting annexation of Kingsgate, North Juanita, and Finn Hill into Kirkland. And the reason I was so invested in that was that we were very dissatisfied with police response times that we were getting from King County. Our area in Kingsgate was served from the county police precinct in Kenmore, which covered the entire area from Kenmore to Snoqualmie Pass, usually with 2 officers on duty. And sometimes it would take 45 minutes to get someone to come to your house. And that was my primary motivation. And public safety has always been a top priority for me and continues to be on the council now. I also have as my other 2 top priorities, fiscal responsibility and sustainable budgets, and transparency and public engagement. I served as president of the Washington Coalition for Open Government for 13 years, the state's premier organization protecting the public's right to know what the government is doing. And I also was one of the the lead member of the council in crafting Kirkland's public records rules and ordinance, which are a model for the entire state. In Kirkland, we know how to do the Public Records Act right. In terms of principles, I believe in the same principles on which our nation was founded. Things like individual liberty, personal responsibility, limited government, free enterprise, and tolerance for others, for their rights, and civility. And those are the things that I practice in my work on the City Council. Thank you very much for being here tonight, and I look forward to your questions.
John?
Thank you. My name is John Tim Chizen. I am an attorney, a Kirkland Planning Commissioner, a veteran, a husband, and a father of 3. In 1946, after World War II, my grandparents moved here because Kirkland had a housing project that was built for veterans being discharged from World War II, and my family moved here because of an affordable housing opportunity. I'm raising my kids here with my wife Tracy, who's seated up there, and my kids are ages 3 through 7, and I am invested and excited about our city's future. In 2017, I joined the City of Kirkland's Planning Commission and has served as a Planning Commissioner and as the Chair of the Planning Commission. And I have been involved in every major decision, planning decision in our city in recent history. I have been deeply involved in the planning of the 85th Street Station Area Plan, which is a plan that I believe needs improvement, and a plan to increase the population up and down 85th Street, providing housing and other amenities. I've been involved in our tree code and preserving our green spaces. Kirkland currently has a 40% tree canopy, which means that if you look at Kirkland from a satellite, you'll see 40% trees, and the rest of it is paved and roads. Bellevue has 28%, Seattle has 12%, and preserving that 40% tree canopy, if I'm elected to the Kirkland City Council, will be a major goal of mine. I've also been part of efforts to create affordable housing, and our city has an opportunity to create affordable housing in the 85th Street Station Area Plan. If I am elected, I will be transparent in my actions. I will not attend or participate in closed-door meetings where substantive decisions are made without your knowledge. I will be inclusive in my leadership, and I will support strengthening neighborhood organizations and strengthening the structure that our 14 neighborhoods have and the input that they have in the decision-making process in our city. One way to learn about the values that candidates have is to look at their endorsements. You can look at my endorsements at www.johnt4kirkland.com, and you can look at the organizations like Kirkland Teachers, the Lake Washington Education Association, the Transit Riders Union, Washington Bikes, and others that have endorsed my candidacy and believe it's time for me to be elected. I hope you do too. Thank you for your, I hope you get your vote. I gotta stop. Okay, thanks.
And then moving on to position 6, as we said, Amy Falcone could not make it tonight, so we go to the challenger, Ryan James Turek.
Thank you. I'm Ryan James. I'm running for position 6 for Kirkland City Council. I want to thank the neighborhood tonight for inviting me, and I want to thank you all for attending tonight. I look forward to hearing your questions and your concerns for Kirkland. But I want to let you know why I chose to run this year. Your current city council is no longer listening or collaborating with its citizens and neighborhoods. I promise you, when I obtain the position, I will work collaboratively with you, and I will deliver transparency on our decision-making process. It is time for the local voices of Kirkland to return to the local governing of Kirkland. I've been a part of this community for over 10 years through many different nonprofits, charity, and volunteering. Currently, I'm the Vice President of the Kirkland Chamber of Commerce, and I have operated my business here for 11 years now. I have been a very integral part of the communication process on local volunteering and through our economic development. Tonight, I want to listen, I want to learn, and I hope that I can count on your vote coming in November. Thank you.
And that will do it for our opening statements. And before we get to the questions, we just want to do a little clarification. You see 5 candidates up here. Obviously, we'd hope to have 6. They are each running for 3 different positions. They are all voted by the council or by the electorate at large, and they are seated by position. You see the first table is position 2, position 4, and then position 6 on down the line. As we go through the questions, because everyone has the same constituency, everyone will have a chance to answer the question. So we will group the responses by position and then move on to the next position. Since we've been starting with position 2 for opening statements and our fun little stop at the beginning, we'll begin with position 6. And for our first question, we figured we'd start with something a little bit easy. We'll give you a bit of a softball and talk about transportation. Because nothing could be easier in an area like this, quite like transportation. Hypothetical, again, hypothetical situation. 5 years from now, Sound Transit puts on the ballot ST4. Part of their plan would be to place light rail through the entire cross-Kirkland corridor. Would you or would you not support this, and why? Ryan James.
No, I would not support this. I didn't support this the first time it was murmured throughout our community, and I listened to many of your concerns regarding that. The work I did at the time of the CKC development through the Cultural Arts Commission, I was chair at that time, we spoke heavily about the CKC being a park setting and bringing a very important greenway for Kirkland. We selected outdoor sculptures and mural projects so that people walking the trail, people enjoying the trail, had something to gaze upon in addition to the greenery that was around. Every conversation we had during the CKC development was it about being a park setting. What I would do symbolically is make it a park. Thank you.
Position 4, again, we'll go in reverse order. John.
If somebody tries to take away the cross-Kirkland corridor, I will chain myself and my family to a tree located on the trail. There is zero chance I will ever let something like that happen. And balancing the priorities of Kirkland versus the priorities of King County is something that I will be strong about. And Kirkland will never vote to remove the cross-Kirkland corridor. And the only people who will ever come after it will be outside counties or state or whoever. And we have to have a strong city council that is not just there to cut ribbons and do ceremonial things, but also protect our city from outside influences that may not have our best interests at heart and may just see a global or regional picture and say, hey, there's no trees here, let's just do something here. Thank you.
Toby.
Sorry, trying to get my timer started. I absolutely agree that we need a strong voice to protect our interests when it comes to this question. That's why I was one of the 3 people who wrote the statement against Sound Transit 3 when it was up for a vote amongst the people. I thought then, and still think today, that putting light rail up the Cross-Kirkland corridor would be a mistake. I actually got an op-ed published in the Seattle Times proposing an alternative route, extending the light rail from Redmond into Totem Lake up Willows Road, which would be much less expensive, half the price of going through the middle of Kirkland. Alternative would be putting it up I-405. So if the region wants it, we can accommodate it, but not on the CKC.
Position 2 now, Kelly Curtis.
Thank you. So I told you that my background is in the park board, and my vision for the CKC is that it's a linear park. This is a non-starter for me. I actually wrote an article about the CKC and how it connects 9 or 10 of our public parks for the Nature Conservancy a few years ago. Putting light rail through the middle of the CKC would bifurcate our city, and that's not what we want. We want a connected city and a connected community. My vision for the CKC is it's more like a High Line, the High Line in New York, for those of you that have been there. What I'd like to see along the CKC is our master plan implemented, which has a lot of park space and a lot of active space. What we are doing is any sort of zoning that happens next to the CKC, we require housing and communities to connect to the CKC. So we're integrating the CKC in the city, and it's a beloved asset for this community. As John said, no one is going to let us take it away from them.
Katie.
Hi, so I'm in agreement with everyone else. Of course, I wouldn't allow light rail on the CKC. The one thing that confounds me is that Kirkland and Bellevue and some of the other cities haven't already gone to the Puget Sound Regional Transit Authority to renegotiate different routes, because I do understand that it's an easement that they do have, and there's symbolism in declaring it a park. But I would say go to the regional authorities and talk about more appropriate places to put it. I'm a systems and operations person. It makes no sense to take light rail and put it right through houses within a bedroom community without access to it. The logical place would be 405. Thank you.
Well, we seem to have something of a unanimous decision here, so not a lot of daylight between the candidates, but I will ask a follow-up to each of you. While it's easy for a candidate and a politician to be against something, and clearly you are all against putting light rail through the Cross-Kirkland corridor, open-ended question, how do you solve Kirkland and vis-a-vis the region's transportation problem? The population is growing, particularly here on the east side. A lot of the people that live in Kirkland don't work in Kirkland and need to get to Seattle and other places. What is your solution? And we'll go back down the other direction. Katie.
So I'm a bus rider, and the one thing I've noticed is that every 3 months, King County Metro cuts more and more routes, and the frequency of those routes. We need to put pressure on King County to reinstate more bus routes. It's really unfortunate that 2 or 3 years ago, they closed down the Houghton Park and Ride, and we lost several bus routes and services. So I find it interesting that while we keep losing more rapid transit and options for people to use something other than cars, that we continue to focus on growth without creating the infrastructure required to maintain and ease that growth.
Kelly?
Thank you. So 60% of our workers drive out of the city to work. 60% drive in the city to work. The problem is we don't have enough affordable housing, so the people that cut your hair, work in your grocery stores, mow your lawns, live outside of Kirkland. That causes traffic. We need to build more affordable housing. We need to have more transportation options. We have been working really hard as a city to create more active transportation options to help people get out of their cars. People are loving the Cross Kirkland corridor because they can use it as a commuting area on their bike or their unicycle or walking. We're going to do more of that. Metro is cutting our service. It's a problem for us. We continue to advocate with Metro on that. One of the things Metro is doing is they're doing it on equity scores, which is income of population. So we need to continue to work with Metro so that we qualify for increased transit.
Position 4, Toby.
Well, light rail is not the right answer. Light rail is incredibly expensive, it's destructive of neighborhoods, cuts them right in half. And we need more flexibility in our transit system. I'm actually a strong supporter of bus rapid transit, which is what we're having built in Kirkland right now. We will have the 85th Street station and the 128th Street station up in Totem Lake in a couple of years. They'll both be set up as BRT stations. I'm also a strong advocate of neighborhood shuttles. I think even at the city level, we can create a local bus loop in each neighborhood that will connect people to their local transit center, to their local shopping area, to the local library, those kind of things. And it's something that we can make affordable, especially if we can use modern technology and have them be autonomous electric vehicles.
John?
I'm proud to be endorsed by the Transit Riders Union, and I am a believer in effective transit. The 85th Street Station Area Plan that I've spent hundreds of hours on in our city, and everybody on this stage I think has been involved in to some extent. We designed an enormous bus station for 85th Street. We did that before COVID and prior to the Google Corporation deciding that they weren't going to build thousands of offices there. So now we have plans for an enormous transit center, and it's unclear to me what the need is for this enormous transit center when nobody's building office space up and down 85th Street. And what I'd like to see is a revisioning of the 85th Street Station Area Plan where we focus on the needs of our transit riders that are coming here to work or people that are residents that are going to be here. And we're going to have to look at that because the office space that we counted on is not being built. Thank you.
Position 6, Mr. Turner.
Thank you. So it's about developing solutions. And in this conversation, that is not an easy task, and that has not been an easy task over the history of Kirkland. And it comes down to, as well, as who is here and who is coming in here and who is leaving here. And we very much must develop workforce housability to support the people in our community who work in our community to live in our community. And we must have options on how we get around our community. Most definitely we need to work with Metro Transit on adding additional bus lines, and we need to communicate effectively with them what our needs are and what our plans are around that. Also, interestingly, Bellevue has been working on a pilot program called Bellhop, which brings people around the city of Bellevue conveniently in electric transportation. That is something we can partner with our city neighbor on, learn the benefits and the disadvantages of Bellhop, and see if we can incorporate it into our local city. Thank you.
Well, I think we might have to come back to transportation a little bit later on, but let's move on to some other issues because we do have some limited time. Over a year ago, the city purchased Houghton Village, the former PCC location, for the price of $14 million, with Studio East renting the facility in the short term. What do you see as the best long-term usage of this property? And to shake things up, we'll start with position 4. Toby.
So my vision for that site is to do something like what has been done with the Together Center in Redmond. How many of you have been over to see the Together Center or know what I'm talking about? So it's right next to the Bella Bottega Shopping Center, just to the south, across from the Jack in the Box. It used to be a single-story office complex, just like Houghton Village was a single-story retail facility. Now, it's a 6-story building with offices for non-profits on the first level and 5 stories of low-income and market-rate apartments above. That's what I would like to see at Houghton Village, although we need to fulfill the commitment to have retail on that space, so we need retail on the first level, educational and nonprofit space on the second level, and apartments above. And I think having those apartments above, just like in Juanita Village, just like in Village at Totem Lake, would have a concentrated customer base for the businesses that will be there. Thank you.
John.
Well, first thing I would do is I would incorporate the Houghton and surrounding neighborhood associations in this conversation. That's number one. Number two, I would like to talk to the Lake Washington School District and see if it's a piece of property they could use. The station area plan up and down 85th Street projects a possible population of 20,000 people with 1,000 or 2,000 students. We don't currently have the school capacity to take this on, and there's been, there needs to be more planning for that. Lake Washington High School we're working on upzoning that and taking different measures to do this. But Lakeview Elementary, which is across the street from this, currently has 6 portable classrooms with inadequate heating, inadequate restrooms, and so we have a major school capacity issue. And if Lake Washington School District if we could partner with Lake Washington School District, that's something I'd like to see. But investing in working with our neighborhood associations was where I'd start. Thank you.
Let's go to position 2, Kelly Curtis.
So the Houghton Village was an excellent purchase. The seller came to us and offered to us. We paid 150 square foot. Normal purchase like that is 172 square foot. So it's a wonderful opportunity to activate the community. If the city hadn't purchased it, we wouldn't have had any control of what went in there. Like Councilmember Nixon, I'm looking at housing, I'm looking at opportunities for retail. Completely agree that it's appropriate for school expansion or after school care. This is an opportunity for us to meet the needs of our community, and it's an opportunity for those of us that live in the neighborhood to walk to close by services that we want to enjoy. How many people in Houghton would like to have more restaurants within walking distance? Thank you, everyone. So this is a chance for us to do something creative. We're not done. Studio East is moving in, which will be a great asset to the community because it provides programming for young people. And we will continue to have community conversations about what's next.
Katie.
It's my understanding that there used to be a gas station on that site and that environmental studies need to be done, and then that will determine the price of what kind of a cleanup would be required for development to happen. I would wait. I would wait to find out how much that cleanup would cost before moving forward with any planning. If it's burdensome to the taxpayers of Kirkland, it's not a good deal. And then if it's not burdensome, I would go to the Houghton County, the Houghton Neighborhood Planning Commission, and I would talk with the community and find out what their vision is for it. And if they're interested in working with Lake Washington School District, then bring them into the conversation as well.
Position 6, Ryan J.
So your city spent $14 million on this property. And there's a lot more they're going to be spending as they're continuing to develop what they're going to do with this property. I think that that is a huge issue, and my proposal at this time is to not develop it, and we make it a park. We make it a usable park for the neighborhood. We make it a usable, green, wonderful park that we can all enjoy and activate, because we are going to spend millions more developing this piece of property that was purchased without a lot of your intent and a lot of your communication involved in the process. Thank you.
All right. And we will ask the audience to please hold your applause until the end. It's not to show favoritism over one candidate to the other. I'm going to throw a little curveball, particularly to our timer here, because we're going to try to keep things on track so we can get to as many topics as possible. As a follow-up, and see if we can do 30 seconds for each of you on this. We're talking a lot about zoning and what to do with buildings and how high they should be. A recent poll conducted by the Houghton Neighborhood Association and shared with the city said 85% of respondents favored no more than 3 stories on this particular parcel that we're talking about. But I just wanted to get a broader view of where you guys stand on upzoning. How tall should the buildings be in Kirkland? There seems to be a lot of opposition to that, but yet the population and the business seems to grow so much that the office space and certainly the housing space is needed. We'll start with the challengers this time instead of the incumbents. We'll go position 2, Katie Malik.
Houghton has asked for only 3 stories, so I would stick with only 3 stories. I think it's pretty simple. And also, I would add that with COVID and more people working remotely, the requirement for office space just is not there anymore. If it was, then Google would not have pulled out of the 85th Station project.
Just for a matter of clarification, you say 3 stories. Is that for that one parcel or citywide?
I would for Houghton with
for Houghton specifically.
Yeah, and I think that you would need to talk to individual neighborhoods to find out how they feel about their zoning as well.
Okay. Kelly Curtis.
Thank you. And for the record, we did do an environmental analysis before we bought the property. So we did do our research before we paid for it. It's currently zoned for 5 stories. We will maximize the land value on that piece of property, again, so that we can bring in the housing and the services that the city needs.
You say maximizing the land value, does that mean up to 5 stories?
Yes.
Position 4, again, going with the challengers. John.
Thank you. It's currently zoned for 5 stories. I would let it go 5 stories. I don't think it's possible to have a $14 million piece of property with 3 stories and make the numbers work. 1. 2, on the 85th Street Station Area Plan, I think we've got excessive building heights. We've zoned that for 250 feet, which is far exceeds what the community wanted and what I think we should have. I think we need more reasonable building heights, and I would be against some of those excessive building heights within that station area plan. Thank you.
How do you define excessive?
The community wanted the Google site on the Lee Johnson Chevrolet to be zoned for 150 feet, and the neighborhood associations and the planning commission recommended 150 feet and not 250. Okay.
Toby, next.
Thanks. Well, it's already been pointed out that it's zoned for 5 stories already, and I think that's reasonable if it can pencil out. But I would also make the point that it's the responsibility of the city council to seek the greatest good for the greatest number of people. And sometimes that does not mean saying one neighborhood gets to decide what gets built, even in their own neighborhood. We have to look citywide in order to have policies that comply with state law under the Growth Management Act. And so we would welcome input from everybody in the city as to what's the right thing to do.
And then position 6, Mr. Turk.
Thank you. So as I spoke about over this last year, all of our neighborhoods have vision statements. All of our neighborhoods have unique neighborhood characteristics. Everything we do within our neighborhoods in a city as a whole of Kirkland is about preserving those neighborhood characteristics. So if we are zoned for 5, we should keep it at 5. Thank you.
Moving on to our next topic, and this is sure to be an easy one to discuss, La Quinta. The process surrounding King County's purchase of the La Quinta property for low-barrier permanent supportive housing in March of 2020, as you might imagine, not well received by many South Kirkland residents, affected schools and businesses. There are numerous requests made to the council to include public safety guidelines in support of a national criminal background check. The City of Kirkland currently requires background checks for all city volunteers and employees, but as a whole voted not to require a national criminal background check for potential residents of this low-barrier housing facility. If you are currently in office, did you vote for or against including the national criminal background checks? What was your rationale? And if you're a challenger, would you have voted for or against it, and why? And since we started with the challengers for the last question, let's go with the incumbents this time around. We'll start with Kelly Curtis.
Thank you. I did vote for La Quinta. I think it's a good solution. According to King County, we are going to be required to bring 250 units of permanent supportive housing to Kirkland. This is King County and state law. We need to accommodate this type of housing. This is a great location. I did vote for background checks, but this is complicated. There are 9 steps that go before a resident qualifies for this facility. 9 steps. 2 of them, that you can't answer this in a minute.
I'll be back to 30 seconds or 1 minute?
1 minute, 1 minute.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, new question.
Okay,
So yes,
so I
you're
got
right.
30 seconds. So there's 9 steps that every resident that goes into that housing has to go through. They go through the federal and the state sex offender registry. They are part of the homeless management information system. They are known quantity people. They are already in the system. They are interviewed by a mental health professional to make sure that they qualify for the services and that they're going to get the services they need. They go through a background check if they've shown any violent tendency. They go through a background check if it's not a good location for them. This rumor that we're not having background checks is false. There are, again, 9 steps that the residents have to go through.
Okay, Katie Mellon.
We're putting the onus on a third-party contractor to go through those steps. Recently, 4 facilities that the King County Homeless Authority had the third-party contractor running collapsed due to mismanagement and a lack of oversight. When King County went in to rehouse, they did not know who was living there. I would absolutely have required background checks if I was on the city council, because ultimately it's our responsibility to keep the citizens of Kirkland and the residents of Kirkland safe. It's located right next to a middle school and high school, and in addition to several daycares.
Let's go to position 6, Brian James.
Thank you. So yes, 100% on background checks. I think it's just a common sense thing. We need to know who's going into our facilities. We need to know how we can care for the people going into our facilities. We need to know how to help the people going into our facilities. And we need to protect the people around the facility. And just a quick note on La Quinta, I would have pushed to make it transitional housing with wraparound services. Thank you.
Again, staying with the challengers, Mr. Tim Chisholm.
I've spent the last 10 years as a prosecutor and a defense attorney in the criminal justice system. Background checks aren't super useful. I would run a limited background check to see who's statutorily prohibited from living there, including sex offenders, but we have to pay attention to the behavior at that property. Almost all violent crime and almost all property crime has to do with heroin and fentanyl right now. And we have to keep that off the property, and we have to keep people that are dealing off the property. And if you want to have a safe location, that current behavior needs to be the focus. I live with my kids on 108th between the La Quinta and Met Market, and nobody will be watching this closer than me. Thank you.
You mentioned current behavior. Does that mean that you would oppose background checks?
I would run limited background checks to remove people that are statutorily prohibited from living there. What do you want to do? What's the purpose of performing a background check if you don't know what the standards are? When things come up on a background check, who do you exclude and who do you include? So you're asking me whether I want to perform a background check. We can perform a background check, but the question is who's excluded and for what? And I wouldn't exclude people for low-level crimes like criminal trespass and criminal trespass in the first and second degree, which is the most common thing that people that are homeless are arrested for. All of these people are getting a second chance in life. And I don't think it's very Christ-like to look back in their past 7 years to see what we can find. If we're going to give them a second chance and they're serious about it and they're sober, then let's bring them in and let's treat them like human beings and let's keep this place safe.
Toby Nixon.
Thank you. Well, first I want to address the secrecy question. I objected strenuously to King County strong-arming the city and saying that this was privileged information that we were receiving and that we could not discuss it in public meetings. They made a number of threats against us to say, you have to keep this secret until after we say you can talk about it. And I thought that was terrible. My colleagues on the council will attest to that. But I voted against the agreement with King County, between the city and King County, that excluded background checks. I thought that the background checks should be done. But I want to make the point that this is not a done deal yet, because we still have to do the operational rules of the facility. In those operational rules, even though the contract didn't say the background checks are required, nothing stops us from putting background checks into the rules. And we need to make sure that those rules eject people who commit crimes after they are residents.
Okay. As a follow-up question to everyone on the panel here, as it were, the issue of homelessness and where to put, whether it's affordable housing, low barrier housing, however you want to term it, is something that tends to be a NIMBY issue, not in my backyard. Local residents will oppose putting such things in their neighborhood, so where do you put them? No matter where you go, there's going to be opposition. As elected leaders, it's your decision, it's your responsibility to make these decisions and to make the tough calls, as it were. So, with that very simple question, if not La Quinta, or in a broader sense, if not one location, where do you put low barrier housing, services for the homeless, and the like? And we'll start with Kelly Kurtz.
I'll go 30 seconds or 1 minute.
Well, it's a follow-up, so we'll go with 30.
I was thinking a minute, and then you just took half of it away. So one of the things that I said in a prior forum is, and again, Toby alluded to this, but we're going to do this well. And we're going to set a model for Kirkland on how to do this well. We're going to have a safety security plan, we're going to have a good neighbor agreement, we're going to have a code of conduct. We will need more services in our city. Other services that we have, Sophia's Way, which is next across the street from Lake Washington High School, is not a problem for the community, and the community embraces it. So we will find places for this to be, and we will manage them well.
Okay, Kate?
I just want to be clear that low barriers means it's not sober living. So I just want to make sure everybody's aware of that. We're a community. We have community hospitals. We do not have the support services, the wraparound services that this particular patient population needs. I would argue, and I've argued before, that this should be located near Harborview. Even when these patients come into Montlake Northwest, they get transferred to Harborview. So I would put them in a more appropriate place where they can get the services that they need.
Let's go with Toby Nixon.
Thanks. Kelly made the point, the main point I was going to make was that the city supported shelter by Lake Washington High School. We have not heard complaints about that. We are addressing the issue of mental health and drug dependency. We're building a crisis clinic in Totem Lake. which will be directly adjacent to hundreds of units of low-income housing. So we are focused on doing this right. As a officer of Attain Housing, I can tell you we have low-income housing throughout Kirkland already, and for most people, it's not a problem.
Okay. John?
The ultimate goal, I think, is to have an inclusive model that doesn't silo the homeless in one location, but disperses them throughout our city in affordable housing or in places like the 85th Street Station Area Plan. This was handled in secrecy so that opposition wouldn't materialize, and that's a shame. And if people are trying to strong-arm our city council, then those city council members need to push back. And if there's a secret meeting, I will get up and I will walk out, and I won't participate in it. Boom.
Again, to push for an answer, then where?
Then where what?
Where, if not in a specific neighborhood, where would you put this supportive housing?
As I said, in affordable housing dispersed throughout our city and not just in one location. I mean, there is projected to be 20% of the units that are developed within the station area plan are projected to be affordable units. Those units range from 50% to 80% AMI, and those low-level units, we can put these people here if they can live alone. Okay. So I think the answer is to disperse them throughout our city and not silo them in one location in a motel at the edge of town.
Okay. Mr. Turk.
Great, thank you. The question isn't low-income housing. We have, as we've all pointed out, we have successful low-income housing all throughout Kirkland, all throughout the east side, all throughout our state. The question is the La Quinta and the residents of La Quinta. If we are not setting them up for success and we are not looking at wraparound services and transitional housing where we can pair them with social workers and actually work them to be successful, then there is no solution. Thank you.
Okay. A similar topic along what we've been discussing is housing, affordable housing specifically. Obviously a challenge not only for Kirkland but throughout the region. Young professionals, those working minimum or low wage jobs, particularly in the service industry, and seniors are just a few of the groups that desire affordable housing here in Kirkland. So what's your vision for maintaining or creating more affordable housing within the city? Let's start with Mr. Turek and just go down the line.
So this is actually one of my goals that I've outlined. Workforce housability is incredibly important. We need to support the people who work in our community to live in our community. So some of the barriers around workforce housability. On a certain income level, you can earn credits to be in an apartment within Kirkland. However, once you exceed that income level, you are forced out of that location. We can partner with HUD and build in a workforce housability transition. So as you continue to grow through your employment in Kirkland, you can maintain the apartment that you have. You can start on, for example, Section 8. You can move on to workforce housability credit, and then you can move on to market rate. It's all about movement and transition. Thank you.
Mr. Tim Chisholm.
So, affordable housing is currently, probably the largest crisis we have in this area. I talked recently to the Lake Washington Education Association, our school teachers, and it's the #1 issue they had. Most of them live in places in Snohomish County and elsewhere and have commutes of an hour or an hour and a half to get here to teach our kids. We need the 85th Street Station Area Plan to come online in the 2020s and not the 2030s, the 2040s, or the 2050s. In order to get this station area plan online and that housing built, it's going to take an effort by our city. We have unfavorable interest rate situation, and we also have the major tenant Google that pulled out. We're going to have to work with developers and make them partners. And government doesn't build housing. Only developers build housing. And we're going to have to partner with them and create solutions with them and create a favorable environment for them to develop affordable housing in this interest rate environment. Thank you.
Toby.
So the key to building more affordable housing is to stop making it illegal to build affordable housing. We just have too many regulations. We make it very expensive. It takes a long time to get permits, and we require design review and a whole bunch of other things that drive up the cost of housing. So I'm a big advocate of reducing regulations. The city has been heading in the right direction, right? The council has, just in the last few years, updated our accessory dwelling unit code and the ability to build duplexes and triplexes on single-family lots. But we need to go further. And I believe that the right thing to do is to make it possible for developers to build more housing in a shorter amount of time so it reduces financing costs instead of keeping the strict regulations we have that make it very difficult and expensive to build housing.
Okay. Kelly Curtis.
Thank you. So I've been working on, as I mentioned in my intro, I was part of the Housing Strategy Advisory Group that put together our 5-year affordable housing plan, which was the emphasis for Kirkland passing our missing middle housing code, which allows for ADUs, cottages, triplexes, duplexes. We are seeing a lot of improvement in ADUs being built, and that's interesting that it's supported by the AARP because it's a great solution for seniors to live in place or to age in place. Kirkland has worked on a number of things. We just recently unveiled that we have pre-approved ADU plans with expedited permitting. So if you want to build an ADU, you can do it faster and cheaper. As legislative chair, I also worked on a bill last year that we passed that allows people to rent their ADU in their backyard to people at lower income and get a tax exemption. So we're working on many, many fronts. It's something that we need to continue working on. One of the things that we've built is a housing dashboard. So you can go to the Kirkland dashboard, look up your neighborhood, look up Houghton, and see what units are being built in your neighborhood.
And Katie Miller.
Affordability is a complex, affordable housing is a complex issue, and I think there's a few things I think we should be doing. First, we should be putting mechanisms into place that ensure those that work in Kirkland are the ones who get priority for affordable housing. Currently, there's no mechanism in place, which continues to exacerbate the problem. In addition, a lot of the pressure, cost-wise, is going to be put onto the residents of Kirkland. If I'm elected, I would push back. I would push at the state, who's had a major tax windfall with the capital gains tax, and I would ask them for assistance in helping to fund this. And because part of that problem is because the Growth Management Act has put pressure on certain geographical areas, which the simple basics of economic supply and demand means that that pressure on limited space is going to increase the cost.
We'll ask a follow-up, so we'll go 30 seconds for each of you. When it comes to affordable housing or low-income housing, not necessarily supportive housing, just low-income housing, the government simply can't build it. Private sector doesn't want to build it because they want to build for market rate. They want to make the money. So how, as an elected official in this municipality, in the city of Kirkland, would you encourage the construction of as many affordable living units as possible? And we'll just go in reverse order. So, Kate.
So once again, I would put pressure on the state to assist with their capital gains windfall. In addition, I think you can identify areas within Kirkland that are going to be easier to develop. I would work with developers, and also, as Toby pointed out, there's a lot of issues with permitting. The city of Kirkland makes it very difficult and onerous, and most developers, when I've spoken to them, they avoid building in Kirkland specifically because of our permitting processes.
Okay, Kelly?
So there is $1 million or $1 billion that the state put forward last year to help fund affordable housing because it is a state problem, a regional problem. We work with a number of organizations. We put our money into Arch. Soon there will be over 900 units being built in Totem Lake of affordable housing. We have inclusionary zoning, so we require affordable housing in developments. There are continued things we can do, expediting permitting, private-public partnerships to collaborate to build more housing.
Position 4, Toby.
So I'm going to talk about one specific idea that we're pursuing, and that is working with faith communities that have surplus land to donate that land to be used to construct low-income housing. This has been done around the state, around the nation. St. Luke's Lutheran Church in Bellevue now has, they had an unused parking lot in the back. Now that is a multi-story low-income apartment run by Sophia Way. We should do that in Kirkland too, on excess property owned by faith communities.
Okay. Mr. Tim Chisholm.
The Planning Commission of the City of Kirkland has addressed this issue at so many meetings, and it is such a complex issue. If you require a developer to build no affordable housing, then all you get is market rate. If you require a builder to build too much affordable housing, nothing gets built because they're not going to do it. We have to work with developers in this interest rate environment to find a percentage of affordable housing that works for their numbers and encourages development. If we don't, at 7 or 8% interest rates, and if we're going to tack more affordable requirements, it's going to be very hard to develop. Our developers have to be our partners.
Mr. Turek.
Exactly. It's about partnering with the stakeholders. We do have inclusionary zoning in Kirkland, and we can continue to build upon that. We want to see a wealth of new building of fourplexes, duplexes, units, anything that we can do to increase the housing market and the available inventory will help on our affordable housing front. Thank you.
Okay, moving on, so back to a minute for each of the candidates. Although some may consider this a bit old news, still very pertinent to many of the people, particularly in this neighborhood, the Houghton Community Council was recently disbanded. It was a key condition to agreeing to the annexation of the city of Kirkland, and then after nearly 2 years ago, citizens Houghton voted to extend the council another 4 years by a margin of 75%. So for those who don't know, it is a community council that in effect had veto power over some of the city council issues when it came to their neighborhood. Now, the question is going to be a little bit different for the incumbents versus the challengers. For the incumbents, please help us understand the thinking behind your vote and why you voted the way you did. As a challenger, please provide your thoughts on how you would have voted and why. So let's start with the incumbents, and to kind of shuffle things around, let's start with position 4, Toby Nixon.
Well, thanks. When I was first elected to the council almost 12 years ago and looked at the Houghton Community Council, my feeling at the time was a deal's a deal. That's the law that was in place, and it should stay. But after I got elected to the council, I started to see how the Houghton Community Council distorted the planning process, not just within Houghton, but citywide. And you effectively had a veto authority that, because the city really wants to have a single zoning code, a single set of regulations citywide, the HCC was dictating policy citywide. And I came to believe that that was simply not tenable, and so I supported the elimination of community councils.
Okay, and again, we're going to stick with the incumbents and then come to the challengers. So Kelly Curtis.
This one's, of course, very personal to me because I served on the Houghton Community Council. And 2 members are here tonight, and they are good decent people that worked very hard for the city of Kirkland. And John Kapler taught me a hell of a lot about land use policy. But it was clear that this is one city and that we should have code that covers all city. It was an unfair system, and as we've talked tonight about the need for affordable housing, it wasn't okay for one neighborhood to go, not here. We have to solve our problems together. We should have one vote, and we should work together as a community, and that's why I voted yes.
Now to the challengers, and we'll go with the challenger who doesn't have anyone facing him at the moment. So we'll start with Mr. Turek.
Thank you. So this was before my time. So from what I understand, this came down from a state. We had 2 of these community councils in the state of Washington, and this was a state directive to eliminate them. Had I been on the Kirkland City Council at the time, I would lean back, though originally I was nodding my head when Toby said a deal is a deal. That is a deal that the city struck with the city of Houghton, and I would have honored that. If you are having shortcomings in communication and coming through and not being able to come to agreement, you just have to continue to have that conversation, and you have to continue to work together, but honor the agreement that you made with the city. Thank you.
Mr. Tim Chisholm.
You know, this is a personal issue for me. I worked on the Planning Commission with members of the Houghton Community Council, and I learned a lot from them. Number 1, end your meetings by 9. Number 2, go to the bar afterwards. That's what I learned from the Houghton Community Council. These guys and ladies are top notch. I would have, as a member of the Planning Commission, I refused to vote on every single time they asked me to vote on the elimination of the Houghton Community Council because I didn't believe the process was being transparent. Number 2, I would have, if I was on the city council, I would have voted for a transition period. I would have only voted for the elimination of the Houghton Community Council if there was maybe a 12 or 24-month transition period, so we could have built up a robust neighborhood association and then transition to that model. Instead, what happened was the state legislature just ended it and did really nothing to assist us in building a neighborhood organization. People like Jennifer Lloyd, Greg, Harris, you people have really done the hard work. Larry, you've done the hard work. Thank you.
And finally, Katie Malley.
So I've had an opportunity to talk with people in other neighborhoods who, when the Houghton Community Council was dissolved, they were excited because they initially felt it was inequitable. They've since come to regret that it's been dissolved, as they found that it was an opportunity for a voice for Houghton community, for the Houghton community, and it also extended into other neighborhoods as well. My policy as a leader is that you're successful when all boats rise. You're not successful when you take things away from other people in the name of equity. I would absolutely have gone and found ways to advocate and find ways for the other communities and neighborhoods to advocate for themselves in a way that made them feel that their voice was heard as well, in addition to Houghton. And I would not have voted to take it away.
Similar question, and we'll stick with a minute for each of the respondents here. Now that the Houghton City Council has, or Houghton Community Council, I should say, has been dissolved, we all know that the Kirkland City Council is elected at large. You don't have districts. So what is the role of a neighborhood association? How do you view that? How do they get involved in city policy? We'll start with Mr. Turek and just go down the line.
So I'm a huge advocate for neighborhood associations, and it's very similar with a lot of our business associations. And it's how we communicate with our city council and how we come together to have conversations and how we put together our needs and our values as an association. But the key factor is the city council listening? Is it having the conversation with our associations? And at this time, it is not. And that is a problem. And when I obtain the position, I will be vital in having those conversations continue. that I've already been sitting down with all the associations and having great conversations. You have visions for each of your neighborhoods, and it needs to be respected. Thank you.
Mr. Tim Chisholm.
So Kirkland has 14 neighborhoods, and we have the Kirkland Alliance of Neighborhoods, which is a forum for those 14 neighborhoods to go to. I would like to see those 14 neighborhood associations strengthened. The role of a neighborhood association in the planning process is to give input on the neighborhood plan, and nobody can do that better than the people that live in that neighborhood and know which sidewalks are broken and which parks need improvement and which connections need to be made between a sidewalk and a dead end. You can't do that without neighborhood associations. I will oppose any measure to remove individual neighborhood association plans from our city planning and consolidate them. And I fear that that type of plan or process may be being considered in our city hall. But I will do everything I can to lift up the neighborhood organizations, and I will oppose marginalizing the neighborhood organization's role in our city's process. Thank you.
Mr. Nixon.
Thanks. Well, I'm also a strong supporter of neighborhoods. I have served, after getting elected to the city council, I backed out of it, but I have served on the board of the Totem Lake Neighborhood Association and then what became the Evergreen Hill Neighborhood Association. And I've seen firsthand how it works and why it's so important to have that channel for engagement with the city, for participation in neighborhood planning and visioning, the ability to raise issues, CIP projects that are important, the neighborhood safety program, all of those. Our neighborhood was deeply involved in the planning of 132nd Square Park, for example. But one thing I would specifically do to help strengthen the neighborhood associations is to restore a robust budget for each association, an allocation of funds from the city to enable the neighborhood to have more events and more engagement within the neighborhood, to bring people together, to get to know each other, but most importantly, to fulfill these important roles in the planning process.
On to position 2, Kelly Curtis.
So, what I was going to say is, this is proof why neighborhood associations are important. Look at the participation that we're having tonight. The neighborhood associations are instrumental to building community, and it helps you meet your neighbors. And I'm sure some of you have come to these meetings and met people that live close to you and you hadn't met before. What they do is they build community, and I agree that they provide input that I don't know what roads in Finn Hill need to be improved, so it helps. It's a good communication effort to the city and the neighborhoods. It also needs to be a collaborative process. But what I would like to see is I want to see the neighborhood associations be able to reach out further into the community to bring more voices to the table. What we don't want is just a segment of the neighborhood, and it could be single-family homeowner who's retired. We want to hear from young families. We want to hear from renters. We want to hear from diverse voices to participate in the neighborhood associations.
Ms. Malik.
The dissolution of the HCC was the first step in the city's consolidation of power. It was recently mentioned that they want to streamline neighborhood planning for moving forward. I think that that's one of the reasons why I'm running, is because the city council stopped listening to its residents and constituents. I would advocate for what Toby has said, for making more robust neighborhood communities and providing more robust funding so that they can engage and also continue with the current structure of the neighborhood planning commissions every 2 years in different neighborhoods and individually.
As a follow-up, and we'll make this a rather quick one because it's a simple yes, no with a very brief why or why not, so maybe 15 seconds each on down the line. There seems to be a lot of concern over how elected officials are responsible to the constituents. As we mentioned at the top of this segment, the city's city council is elected at large. So the question then, would you be in favor of changing the city charter to district elections? The city of Seattle did that several years ago. It seems to be the way a lot of cities are going. Again, we'll go with 15 seconds and we'll just kind of go in reverse order. Ms. Mallett.
I would not be opposed to that. I think it would ensure that neighborhoods would have a voice throughout the city council.
Look at Seattle politics. What we don't want is a city council that is fighting over resources, fighting over where we're going to spend money for safe routes to school, fighting where we're going to do transportation projects. I think districts would be a disaster.
Mr. Dixon?
Well, I could just say ditto to what Kelly just said and save a little bit of time. But we've looked at this, and districts would have benefits such as it makes it less expensive to run for city council, so more people would be able to do it. But I agree that it's better to have 7 council members who are concerned about what's happening throughout the city rather than have it be parceled up by district.
Mr. Chisholm?
When you preface your question with Seattle did this, my answer is no. When you want the best and brightest people in your city to rise to the city council, I think districts create a barrier to that. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Turk?
No, I would not be in favor of breaking it up into districts. We are the community of Kirkland. It is best when we all work together, and to have 7 voices in your corner and in your favor working for you for the city is the current best model.
Speaking of budget and spending, one of the candidates mentioned that they're fighting over resources in the city of Seattle, just as everyone fights over resources on the federal and state level. Most of us in business or in our personal life today are faced with having to cut expenses due to economic challenges. If asked to cut city expenses, which is likely going to happen, how would you approach this? What would you cut first and why? We'll start with position 4 and we'll go with the challengers, and so we'll go with Mr. Tim Chisholm.
Yes, 30 seconds or 60?
We'll go with 60 on this one.
Okay.
This is a new one.
As a planning commissioner, I have seen a lot of third-party consultants and a lot of consultants brought into the city to do lots of work. The majority of money that I see leaving the city goes to third-party consultants, and I'd like to see more things handled internally by our city staff and a more robust process for whether or not we have to go externally and pay private corporations millions of dollars. We're going to have to look at our budget and go internal and really start cutting things. And sometimes we're going to have to tell our city staff to go ahead and handle things internally and stop getting third-party consultants. And that's one way that I've seen on the Planning Commission where I see millions and millions of dollars going out to consultants during the planning of some of these projects where I thought we could have done more internal with the staff that we had. Thank you.
We're going to stay with the challengers and then come back to the incumbents. So, Katie Mallett.
So as I said earlier, the Kirkland City Council's budget has increased, it's doubled over the last 10 years, and our population's only increased by 10%. One thing that's low-hanging fruit would be getting rid of the third-party consultants. I've seen that a lot in my career. Third-party consultants come in, you spend a lot of money, and they oftentimes give you the same answers that the folks within your own shop already had the answers to. I would also look at the delta of the variance from 10 years ago to what we're spending now and identify areas where the budget's ballooned and ask why, and does it really serve purpose? So I think you would need to look at it, the whole budget and not just small chunks to identify ways to make it sensible.
Mr. Turner.
Thank you. I find it interesting that my peer, John T., had selected consultants as well. So both him and I serving for the city on commissions and being directed that we had no choice into working with those said consultants, I think gives an interesting perspective as we know individually, John and myself from the commission work, how much we spent on those consultants. So my immediate proposal, yes, is to chop the consultants and in replace, listen to our city commissions. I served on the Arts Commission as chair for 8 years. We were a dedicated group of volunteers with extensive experience within the field that we were tasked with, which was the arts. We did not need to bring on consultants to help us pick sculptures for a firehouse. It's why we are there. So my proposal is to expand the voices on the commissions and for our city council to listen to those voices. Thank you.
Okay, now to the incumbents, Kelly Curtis.
So Kirkland is an incredibly fiscally responsible city, and we have a AAA credit rating, which means that we can borrow money at a low cost. What you're seeing in our current budget is we received millions of dollars in funds in pandemic funding, which sits on our spreadsheet that already went out. We have strong reserves. We put 1% of our property taxes in a reserve. We have utility fund reserves. These monies are sitting there in case we ever do have an economic downturn so that you can continue